أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين صدق الله العظيم.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Neelam Fida. I'm the Global Child Protection and Inclusion Advisor and Safeguarding Lead for Islamic Relief Worldwide based in the UK. It's an absolute honor to be here presenting on this wonderful blessed day. It's actually a double celebration for me. One, I get to speak to you wonderful people, but also it's the Universal Day of the Child, a moment in the year where we take time to celebrate children, create safe, loving environments for them so their voices can be heard and amplified across the world. So I hope that you are also able to take a moment in your day to really enjoy these blessings that Allah has bestowed upon us. Over the course of the next 15-20 minutes, I'm going to be sharing with you some of the areas that we really need to focus on as we live through this unprecedented time where our face-to-face interaction has now moved to a virtual world. So what does that bring with it? It's definitely made the world a much more smaller space, but what are the challenges that are now faced by children, that are now faced by parents, guardians, in relation to the exposure children are having on the online platform? So what I'll do now is just quickly share my presentation with you. There we go. So some key areas that I would like to touch on is the immense challenge children are facing in light of violence, abuse and exploitation across the globe. We'll then bring that kind of focused in to see what are the risks children are facing online, particularly in light of COVID-19, and what are the steps or measures parents, guardians, siblings can take to help better protect them with an active aspect of child participation. So this isn't very much the area where we dictate, but how can we have this safe environment within the home where children feel comfortable, feel secure to voice their concerns if they are being exposed to online violence or abuse. But I'd like to start by reminding ourselves and taking a moment to reflect on the blessing that children are. I have nieces and nephews, and I cannot remember my life without them. They have become such an integral part of everything we do, and a lot of the laughter we experience is through their innocence. And these are blessings that Allah bestows on He who He pleases. And what we forget is, in the hustle and bustle of our daily lives and routine, that we don't necessarily carve out a specific time, a specific space where we sit and enjoy their company, or that we hear their voices in discussions and dialogue. So I really want us to remember that these children are a gift from Allah, and that we should actively take time out to hear, to listen, to engage, to play, and fulfill their rights as best as we can. But there are some people across the world who, unfortunately, do not have that in mind. 1 in 2 children aged between 2 and 17 suffer from violence in the last year, and these were statistics taken from 2016. 1 in 4 adults were abused as children. And again, when we think about abuse and violence, it's often a situation where it's a cycle of violence. So without the necessary intervention, without the necessary support and treatment, that there is research to say that children that experience abuse and violence in their childhood may possibly become perpetrators of violence and abuse in their adulthood, because it is a learned behavior, and without that support, intervention and treatment, they may become abusers when they grow up. This presentation is for around 15 to 20 minutes. And the next statistic is something which really I find difficult to grapple with. Every 7 minutes, a child dies as a result of violence. So in the course of my presentation, 2 children would have lost their lives to violence. And this is a very unfortunate state of affairs, but it also reminds us that there is so much more that we need to do to ensure their safety and well-being. 10 million children are subjected to modern slavery across the world. Again, there are so many interventions that are being implemented to ensure children are protected against modern slavery, but we see it across the developing world, across the developed world, where children are being misused, are used as domestic help, but are exposed to horrific violence within the home. And then we focus in on online statistics. So 1 in 3 children have access to the internet. Over 700,000 individuals at any one point connect with children for the purpose of sexual engagement, whether that's in the form of sexual exploitation or abuse. Again, these statistics are very startling, but to also give you an idea, 10 years ago, there was about 1 million different forms or materials of child abuse online. That's 10 years, 1 million different forms of child abuse online. 10 years on, that has increased to 70 million different forms of child abuse materials that these individuals, these perpetrators can get access to. So you can see how overwhelming these statistics are when you think of the online platform and how easy it is to get access to these very upsetting and hurtful materials. Which is why it's so important for children to be educated and children to be informed about the measures they need to take to better protect themselves. To put these statistics in a more meaningful manner, I'm going to now show you a short video which will illustrate some of these facts.
Every half a second, a child makes their first click online, discovering a world of endless opportunities. In fact, 1 in 3 internet users worldwide is a child. But the internet was not designed with children's safety in mind. And too often, it can pull them down a dark path to lasting trauma. Of all the challenges facing children online, bullying, grooming, exposure to harmful people and content, the worst threat is sexual exploitation and abuse. At any point in time, more than 750,000 predators are looking to connect with children for sexual purposes. And this violence against children is rising at a startling rate. A decade ago, there were already 1 million images of online child sexual abuse reported. In 2019, that number climbed to 70 million, with the most affected children being under 10 years old. These digital offenses have devastating consequences. They can shatter the lives of children and inflict horrific mental and emotional scars. There are no built-in safeguards to protect children online, and this dire situation means we all need to act now. The End Violence Movement and its 400 partners are building a global network to keep children safe no matter where they live. We're connecting across borders to develop and share solutions that work, driving change at the community, national, and international levels. To keep children safe online, we've invested millions of dollars into solutions through our fund, such as developing and testing new technology to identify harmful material and behavior, collecting data and exchanging knowledge, including national assessments across many countries, strengthening systems and networks so that all parts of society can work together, and educating parents and children on the risks and how to manage them. We're working together to keep the internet a safe space for children so they can continue to learn, to explore, and to navigate a whole world of opportunities. We're making important progress, but there's still so much more to be done. And we all have a role to play. Find out how you can join the global movement of individuals, organizations, and governments keeping children safe online.
The Global Partnership to Ending Violence Against Children is a wonderful body which has brought a number of organizations together to tackle this issue. So I would highly recommend, when you have the chance, to explore and benefit from that. What they were able to demonstrate in that video was how small the world has become for children who have no restrictions in terms of borders, in terms of rooms. As soon as they connect onto the internet, someone from Pakistan, India are right there in their room, whether they're from England, whether they're from Pakistan, whether they're from any part of the world. The world has become a much more smaller entity, but with that comes numerous challenges, as the video was able to illustrate. But here are some of the areas where I think and feel it's very important for parents, guardians, and individuals who are using the internet on an excessive basis. And you may not feel that that's the case, but if you look at the data at the end of the week that everyone gets access to of how much usage you have had online, it will be a frightening statistic, believe me. But when it comes to children's access online, there are some key areas where you do need to focus in on, and you do need to speak to them. These 9 areas are spaces where the risk to children and their exposure is very high. For example, sexting and sending nude pictures. Now, this isn't something that you would imagine is happening within your home or within your community, but unfortunately, this is becoming a much more heightened risk to children, particularly in situations where they feel that they might be in a relationship where they can trust the other person. So I was investigating a case of child abuse where it was peer-on-peer abuse. A young female who felt that she was in a loving relationship was exposed to some compromising situations where pictures were circulated. These pictures were then shared amongst a group of young male youth who blackmailed her into stealing things from the home, into other very harmful situations, taking her to a point where she was really considering self-harm and suicide. It was only when one of the individuals that was blackmailing her told her to steal some jewelry from her home that her mum caught her, and thankfully she took the more gentler approach and asked her, this is so out of character, what's wrong with you? I've seen a slow deterioration in your behavior, you're not talking, you're not eating, what's going on? And unwillingly she was able to share what had happened. And the mother in this situation took the right decision and called the police. In this case, the police then set up an undercover operation where they were able to identify who the group of young male youths were, and to what extent these pictures had been circulated amongst the community. And yes, there's certainly guidance and protection that should have been there right from the get-go. But if someone does find themselves in that situation, what should happen? What are the parameters that we can set? And sometimes there is very little thinking that goes around when we start using this virtual world. You know, we live in the time and the age of Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, and all these other online platforms where children of all ages are having access. And if they don't have access, then the parents are under pressure that we're not moving with the times. My friend has such and such, why can't I have such and such? And then you also have mobile phones who have, you know, we're living in a very interactive world with numerous apps being downloaded. And so it is so important that this discussion happens. And when and if unfortunate pictures or messages or text messages are shared, what should happen and how should the individual behave and engage with their parents? And the parents, it's not a nice situation to be in for a parent or guardian to find this out, but then how do you prevent the same exposure happening to someone else? It's by reporting it, it's by taking the right action. Unfortunately, amongst the Muslim community, there is this heavy stigma around shame and honor. And under that shroud, we end up letting these perpetrators get away with causing the same harm to other young people, to other children. So we must take some responsibility and put those parameters in place to prevent these people from circulating the community and having access to other vulnerable children. It's very important to also understand that as parents, you have to put some restrictions in place too. With every other child having access to a smartphone, the internet is at a touch of a button. That means that they are also exposed to online pornography, online images, online individuals who might expose them to other behaviors and other practices which might incite certain tendencies in them that may lead them to be in difficult circumstances, whether they're the ones that are being abused or may find themselves abusing others. So how can parents put controls in place to prevent them from having access? Each smartphone or laptop computer has parental control on them. So I would encourage you all, depending on the age of your child, that you put those measures in place. For old children or youth, I think it's very important for parents to sit down and have that conversation with them. Most people between the ages of 15 and 24 are aware of these risks, have been told about these risks, or may have seen these risks, but until it doesn't happen to them, until it doesn't happen to someone close to them or a loved one, it feels like unnecessary pressure, unnecessary worry. But it is a reality we are living with. The number of children who have found themselves entrenched in gambling through online gaming is startling. Similarly, with streaming online videos or having access to explicit or inappropriate content has also increased because the world has become so much smaller. So with these areas, I would very much encourage you all to have those conversations with your children. And with young people and children, speak to your parents. It's so important that you create that environment for your young people and your youth to speak to you in a safe way. Often they might be suffering in silence because they're fearful of the reaction that they may face as a result of what they're going to tell you. And you would rather them speak to you and get the right advice than to speak to another peer, and that individual doesn't necessarily have the foresight or may have the know-how of how to engage parents. I would also say that when children find themselves or young people find themselves in this predicament, they often blame themselves. And so it is important for you to just remind them of key things. First of all, that you make them feel safe. If a person is coming to you, whether it's a child within your family, or if you're an auntie, it's your niece or nephew that's coming to you, it's essential that they feel safe. Don't promise them that you're going to keep them their word a secret, because you will have to speak to their parents if you're a friend, a guardian, or a caregiver. You will have to inform the police or health intervention if things have escalated. It's important that you remind them that it's not their fault as well. Sometimes it's very difficult to keep up with the speed of how things progress. So they might be doing it unintentionally to impress a friend, and before they know it, they're really deep into a very difficult situation. And always remind them that they can trust you, that you are there to help and support them, and that whatever they're sharing, there is a way around it. The worst thing that young people or children feel is that there's no escape, like their life is ended, it's going to be known to everyone what's happened, and there is no way out of it. And it's a very bleak horizon for them. And this is what perpetrators also do. They make that individual feel like all control over their safety, over their well-being has been taken from them. And this perpetrator is the only person that can now navigate them through life. And so it's important to remind them that they do have control and that we can work our way through this situation. Because the other thing that children will then tend to go down is a very dark situation with their mental health. Many children experience depression and anxiety when they find themselves being exposed to violence, abuse, bullying online. They might find themselves self-harming or thinking about suicide to escape the hurtful and harmful situation that they're in. They might be exposing a behavior along the lines of an eating disorder, or you may find them having panic attacks. All these signs and symptoms, and this is not an exhaustive list, there are other signs and symptoms, but this is why it's so important to have that open and frank relationship with your children, because if you don't have that, you won't pick up on some of these signs or symptoms where they might be hurting themselves, or they're not eating, that they might be having panic attacks. So for you to be able to pick up on some of these signs, you need to be having that interaction with them. You need to be able to speak about these issues in a very safe way. It's very hard for a child to admit that they've done something that breaches the confidence of their parents, or may show them in a light that the parents may not be proud of them. So for the child to take that step to come and speak to you, you need to have that environment. And I can't stress that enough. The number of young people I've spoken to who have said, I could have told my parents, I could have spoken to my mom or my dad, but I was so scared. I didn't want to shame them. I didn't want to embarrass them. I didn't want to come across like a failure. And I know that they've sacrificed so much for me. So it's important for you to also remind them that you are there for them unconditionally, and for them to be able to speak to you in the same manner. So what are some of the steps that parents can take to help alleviate this situation if, may Allah protect us all, a child finds themselves in this situation? Again, reassure them that you're interested in their life, both offline and online. So when you're sitting and speaking to them, it's not from the perspective that you're spying on them or controlling them. That's not the idea here. It's to remind them that you, as a parent, as a guardian, as an older sibling, are engaged with them, are more in tune with what their needs are, and therefore their presence online and offline is important to you. Ask your children to show you what they enjoy doing online and on apps. And this might apply to the more younger children because they are more easily susceptible to abusers online. And unfortunately, there are many. You might be thinking, well, my young children don't have access to the internet, or they're working, that they only use the internet for schoolwork, or, you know, if you're speaking to a relative through Skype or something like that. But then they have access to apps if they have a smartphone. And these perpetrators have very sophisticated ways to get access to children. And therefore, it's really important to be to educate them in a way that they understand, and to look through their apps. What apps are they using? How are they using them? Why are they using them? Always have a very positive mindset when you are speaking to your children and young people in the home. What you don't want to do is create unnecessary worry, unnecessary unease, and you're not policing them. That is not the purpose behind this. It's to encourage them to have control over what they are doing online. You cannot be with them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so what will happen when you're not around, or you're working, or you're busy, or you're entertaining guests? How do you ensure that they are now more meaningfully aware of their own safety and well-being online? Remind them not to worry if something does happen, but to come to you and speak to you and share with you. And if they can't come to you, then find other avenues of people that they can speak to that you trust. Say, for example, an auntie, an uncle, an older sibling, a relative that they bond well with, so that there are numerous ways that that communication can remain open and fluid. One of the more challenging areas is where perpetrators deceive young people and children under the shroud of being a friend online. And again, we are living through these very restrictive environments where social distancing is placed, where children may not be going to school, they may not have access to their friends, and therefore they might be forming friends online through chats, through different platforms. How do you ensure that these friends are actual friends and not just random individuals or perpetrators who are trying to access vulnerable people? What are the telltale signs? Sometimes it's very difficult to pick up on them, but by you having access to them, by you being able to see who they are, and it's not just an image, or they're not making random excuses, you'll have a bit more control over who your children are interacting with, or family members are interacting with. It's also very important to put certain parameters in place of sites that you don't mind your children having access to, and sites that you do not want them having access to. And for the younger children, you can also put safety controls in place so they don't have access to certain sites or certain apps. Again, There's numerous guidance on the Global Partnership for Online Ending Violence Against Children. And there's a section for child online safety where you can get some guidance and support on that. You also have the NSPCC. It's a charity established in the UK where there's a lot of information around child protection, child online safety, guidance for parents and what they can and cannot say to ensure the safety and well-being of their children. And when I say cannot say, it's more in the line of you do not want to create barriers for children who are already experiencing anxiety, stress. So what are the ways in which you can keep that fluid conversation? How can you ensure and build that trust in a child who's already quite fragile because of what they've experienced online? It's also important to remind them of how they can be involved in their own decision making. So for a young person to say, I want to access this site because it makes me feel happy as a parent or a guardian, you can sit with that child and go through that site, go through that app and see what it is about that app that makes them feel happy, or that site that makes them feel happy, because there might be something that you're unaware of that may make a huge impact on this, on the well-being of this child. And what you have to remember is cutting out internet or cutting out this virtual world is also not possible. So you do not also want to create a hostile environment within your home where everything is banned. And now, because those barriers are there, these children and young people are going to go to extraordinary lengths to try and make sure that they're still connected and they're still moving with the times within their social circle or with their peers. So what can you do to make them more mindful of this dark web that exists parallel to the world that they're living in? And the thing with the dark web is the individuals that access the dark web are untraceable. And there are numerous sophisticated technology that's being designed by very intelligent and well-equipped individuals who are able to break some of these dark webs to secure and retrieve these horrific images that are exploiting numerous children. But then they're continuously developing, they're continuously expanding. So it's also important to sit your children down and talk about the parallel world that exists online and how these individuals might access them by different websites. It's also important for parents to be mindful, as we also use the social media platform to connect with friends, to socialize. How do we put those protective measures in place for ourselves as well? Children mimic behavior. If we're spending 90% of our time in front of screens, in front of our phones, having very little meaningful family time, they're going to pick up the same behavior. So, you have to provide the same nurturing environment to the children as you expect from them. So how often are we taking time out away from our devices, away from technology, and just going back to basics and enjoying our meals without any technology around? Where are the moments in the day where we can say, okay, we're going to go for a walk, leave all devices at home, and just enjoy nature, enjoy the environment that we're living in? So as we are experiencing these restrictions due to COVID-19, how can we now go back to those times where we were able to connect with each other without having to depend on technology? I'm immensely grateful. I'm speaking to wonderful people across the world through the blessing of technology. So it's not about cutting it out, it's how to be more mindful around it, and how do we empower and engage children so that they have the control over their safety online, and how do we create a more loving environment where we reconnect with our deen, where we reconnect with the purpose of life, the purpose of having family, the purpose of enjoying the moments that we have together. It's such a fleeting life. Before you know it, it's at an end, and we want to think back that every moment we had on this world with our loved ones was a moment that was cherished. So on that very poignant point, I would like to thank you all for your attention, for your questioning, I'm hoping. If you do have any questions, please share them with the organisers and I will do my best to respond. I will also follow up with an email with numerous sites that you can also access, sort of like a reference page. But I will just remind you that children experience so much online from their own peers, but also from adults. The last thing that they want to feel is that they don't have that safe space at home where they, if they were to experience something of an abusive nature or an exploitative nature online, that they couldn't turn to you. So I think it's really important to remind them of that, of your unconditional love, of the mercy and compassion that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us numerously throughout the Quran, that we also show our families that too. Jazakallah khair, and stay safe. Assalamu alaikum.